You'll get the next one, man.
Thanks, man.
How's everything going with your job, man?
I don't know. It's a big decision. Feels like it's just a little bit over my head
Right.
to take this new job, so.
Cookies! Oh, fake you out.
Chuck Trainer,
What's
what
up,
are you
boys?
doing here, man?
I was just in the neighborhood.
The neighborhood? This is a private drive.
Nah, I'm just kidding. I actually got an email from Terry for some wisdom training today. You Terry?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm struggling with some things, and I saw a Facebook ad. I might have accidentally clicked on
Yeah,
it.
whatever. Raindrop! Oh, hey, ball me. All right, Terry, let this be your first lesson. You probably these wise cliches, all these sayings that all the old heads are using. Like my coach used to tell me, Chuck, you miss 100% of the shots that you take.
I think you mean don't take.
Nah, you say potato, I say tomato. Point is we need to repurpose these phrases for the modern era. For example, if your goals are set a little too high, you need to lower them. You put your expectations at rock bottom, then you'll never miss. See that? With the rim this low, everybody look like Stephon James out here. Kobe! Rest in peace. All right, next lesson, let's go. You heard saying the early bird gets the worm, right? Well, what time do you suppose it is? 3 p.m. right now?
Sure.
Yeah, see, that's nonsense. Now, the guy who said, leave no stone unturned, he knew a thing or two. Because when you're truly wise, you know it isn't about the substance or time of day. It's just where you look. Like under this log, there's gonna be a worm, I bet you. Ready? Voila! Oh, it's a big one! It's a big one! Oh, save yourself! Oh, it's got me on the neck! Oh, hey, a worm.
Man, I hope Chuck is okay. He wrestled a snake.
Sorry, boys. Sorry about that. Where were we? Oh, you got room right here.
Chuck, you sure you're all right? I mean, we can take you to hospital.
Hospital? No way. I live my life in lockstep with the immortal words of Kelly Clarkson when she says, what doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. See that?
Yeah, Chuck. Despite your best effort, man, it actually makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, well, Miss Clarkson failed to mention just how much a snake bite hurts. Hurts like killing a bird with 2 stones.
That's not even close.
Hey, who's the wisdom coach here again? Yeah, that's what I thought. You know what they say, Terry. People in glass houses get stoned. Gentlemen, it's been a good day. You are a lot wiser right now than you were this morning. You can kiss your bliss goodbye, because you gentlemen are no longer ignorant.
Look, Chuck, I have this big career thing going on potentially in my life, and all you can do is take all of these wise sayings and totally screw them up by relating them to Kelly Clarkson and fighting snakes, and all of that, by the way, is not helpful at all.
Wow, Terry. Sorry you feel that way. If I have one piece of advice for your career situation, I guess it would be whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
Wow, Chuck, that was actually helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, all right, boys. I got to get out of here. I got new clients waiting, and you know what they say. You only get one chance at a second impression.
And there he is.
You probably never met someone quite like Chuck Trainum, but we all know what it's like to need practical help for a real life question or a decision and not know how to find it. We need to make a change, but we're unsure how to pivot, or we come to a fork in the road, 2 good options, and we can't figure out which path to take. Or we might even find ourselves at that fork in the road with no good options. What do we do? Because life is like that, right? And while Chuck Trainum is easy to laugh at, the cliche banners and bumper stickers and cheesy phrases, they're around us all the time. They're hard to miss. They're everywhere. And they're as unhelpful as Chuck's laughable misquotes. And so we'll come back to Chuck Trainum in a few minutes, but first I want to ask you a question. A rhetorical question. You probably don't want to answer this out loud. Why are you here? I mean, really, why did you invest your time, your valuable, limited, scarce resource time in church today? Now, if we took a poll, and if people were being honest, people would give different answers. Somebody here would say, again, if you're being completely honest, that you're here because your husband or your wife thinks you should come to church, or someone you care about thinks you should come to church. And more than one person is here today because their kids insisted on it, because the kids love church so much, and from a parent's perspective, it's just not worth fighting with them. And so if that's you, if you're here a little under duress, it's okay. Really, there's no shame in it. Maybe we all come to church at least every once in a while, even though it wasn't the thing that we really wanted to do. It's okay. I'm still glad you're here. I hope you're glad you're here. But most people, when we ask the question, why are you here? They would answer with some version of this. I'm here because I want to be close to God or closer to God. I'm here because I want to live better. I want my life to be better. Or I'm here because I'm in a season that I've got to figure out how to navigate. Most of us come to church because we believe that growing in our spirituality will translate into practical adjustments for the better in the way that we live or the outcome of our lives. We're not here to get the next cheesy cliche phrase, but for real life questions that will actually help us move ahead better. Well, nobody understood this more than James, the brother of Jesus. James wrote one of the books of the Bible, and I would argue it is the most practical book, or at least the easiest to find the practical application for my life in it. And that's why we're going to spend the next few weeks looking at how our lives and the day-to-day of our lives intersect with James's words, his teachings. And if you'll come with us for these next 5 weeks, you'll find constructive, down-to-earth teachings that will help you improve your life, wherever you find your life right now. One more note. We're not going to go through James verse by verse. We don't do that kind of Bible study when we gather together like this, but you can, and you should. James is only 5 chapters. So let me encourage you to supplement our experiences together by reading some of James every day. And if you do that, you will find amazing application from it for your life. Not just of what we unpack here, but lots of other things too. James opens his letter like this. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations, greetings. A couple of quick notes here. First, letters in this day and time, this is a couple thousand years old, all letters in this day and time began by naming the author of the letter, right? James. He says that from the beginning. And I know we don't do much old-fashioned letter writing these days, but when we do, what we do is a little backwards. Imagine now you open your mailbox, you get a letter out, you open the letter, and you unfold it, and it begins like this. Dear Bill. And then after that, there's the body of the letter where the writer tells you whatever they want to tell you. And when do we find out who wrote the letter? At the end, which is kind of dumb. Ancient letters did this better. They began by taking the mystery out of authorship and simply telling the reader who it's from. James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. And then he tells us, all letters were like this, then they tell us who it's to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. And we sometimes call this, what he's referring to here, we call it the diaspora, as in the ones who are dispersed. So James's original intended audience are Jewish followers of Jesus. The 12 tribes are a reference to the 12 tribes of Israel, who used to all live in the same land together, but are now scattered all over the world for reasons that are kind of important, but but are outside of the scope of our conversation today. So James begins the letter like that, like in a normal way. He's telling you who he is and who it's to. And then in verse 5, he does this. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. It, meaning wisdom, will be given to you. So I'm going to ask you if you would just read this one verse of Scripture out loud with me right now, wherever you are. Here we go. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Wisdom. It's more than smarts. It's bigger than academics. It's more practical than philosophy. So who comes to your mind when I ask you to think of someone who is wise? Don't say it out loud. And I want you to hold that person in your mind for a minute. And I want you to ask, it could be somebody that you personally know or somebody that is famous, but what is it about that person who came to your mind? What is it about them that makes you label them as wise? I bet I can tell you. I obviously can't possibly know who you're thinking of. This is not a magic trick. I'm not asking you to pick a card, but don't show it to me. I have no idea who's in your mind, and I might not even know who that person is if you told me. But I bet I know why you think they're wise. Because they know what to do. They know what to do. Not just what you can do, and not a self-serving agenda for what you should do because they get something out of the deal. No, the wise person somehow knows what to do, what's the right thing to do, or the right way for you to discover the decision path so that you'll know what to do. Just being around a wise person, you leave their presence after a few minutes and you say things like, how did they know that? Or why couldn't I think of that? Or you simply walk away feeling like you grew in some way. I've had a few people like that in my life. And they were wise, not because they had some inventory of memorized cheesy phrases, sorry about that, Chuck Trainum, but because they knew what to do. But here's the thing, and this is really important. The wise person knew what to do, but never took away my responsibility to do it. The wise person never overfunctions for me or tries to own my decision or my problem or tries to do it for me, and they never become anxious if I go against their advice. They know what to do, but they also know I have to be the one that chooses to do it. A wise person doesn't judge you for your ongoing stupidity, at least that's certainly been the case for me, but they stand ready to help when you're ready to hear it. We should all want to become wise. We should all want to become more wise, which is why James basically says, hey, listen, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. And when I studied James in preparation for this series, and I've read James many times, because it's just so practical. But when I read and studied it for this series, I found something about wisdom that I had never seen before. James never really defines the what of wisdom. In fact, when I thought about this, it kind of jumped off the page. So I went looking around the rest of the Bible, and the whole Bible never really defines the what of wisdom. When people ask what wisdom is, it's just hard to put it into words. One dictionary I read said that wisdom was the quality of being wise. Huh? You don't really need to be a wise person to come up with that definition. Another dictionary said a wise person has a wise attitude, belief, or course of action. Again, that's kind of dumb. You can't use the word to define the word. That's lame. But this is really enlightening for me. Because even though the Bible doesn't define the what of wisdom, it does define the who. It's almost as if James and his co-writers of the other parts of the Bible are saying, we can't exactly name what wisdom is, but we can tell you where it comes from, or more accurately, we can tell you who it comes from. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask who? God. Why would you ask God for wisdom? Because God is wisdom. Because God invented wisdom. Because God defines wisdom. And if our earlier definition of a wise person is that the wise person knows what to do, well, God would seem to be the apex of knowing what to do. So James is basically saying, look, I might not be able to put wisdom into words, but I can tell you how to get it. How do you get it? You ask God for it. And here's the best part. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. You ask for wisdom, and God grants it. God grants your request. There's a part that you play in growing in wisdom, and we're going to get to that in a few minutes. But first, I want to talk about this strange phrase in between the commas here. If you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. And I want to ask James, and I often do this when I read the Bible, I engage the Bible in a conversation. You can do this too. And I want to ask James, why not leave this phrase out? I mean, why not just say, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, and it will be given to you. You might not know, Jesus did this one time. He had this famous saying in the Bible where he says, ask and it'll be given to you, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will open. And that's simple, cause and effect. You realize you lack wisdom, you ask God for more of it, he delivers. Like Amazon, wisdom, showing up on your door in 2 days or less. It's like Wisdom Prime. Except there are some of us who think that we're disqualified. We can't possibly ever be granted wisdom because we did something that permanently bars us from it, as if truly wise people have only ever been wise. They've never made an unwise decision. Their resume is void of foolish choices. For those of you who think that way about yourself, James would respectfully say, don't be ridiculous. Because God gives wisdom generously to all, without finding fault from your prior unwise choices. He gives wisdom to all who asks for it. You want to be wise? Ask the one who is. Ask for wisdom. And then pursue it. Pursue wisdom. If wisdom comes from God, and if God has promised to give it to me, then I also want to go after it. I want to pursue it. I want to do all I can to get all I can of it. As with most things that I pray for, God grants it as I also chase after it. This is how Solomon put it in the proverb. This is in the Bible. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. In other words, it's like Solomon saying, you want to be wise, you got to go chase wise. Wisdom is embedded in the pursuit of it. This is the beginning of wisdom. Get wisdom. Though it costs all you have, get understanding. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown. All that from your pursuit of wisdom. When we couple James and his saying, ask God for it, with the proverb, we end up with this practical formula for how to become a wise person, which I'm going to define again as knowing what to do, and then being a resource for what to do for others. It's a very simple formula. If you put the proverb with James together, you get this. How do you get wisdom? You ask God for it, and you proactively chase after it. You ask God for it, and you proactively chase after it. And if you grow a little in wisdom, you still ask God for more of it, and you proactively chase after it. But you got to chase it. You got to go get it. That's what the proverb meant. Go get some of that. Go chase after it. Have you ever chased after something in your life so hard that you would stop at nothing to get it? You'd sacrifice everything you could just to get that thing, that degree or job or money or that person. When I was a freshman in college, my buddy Will walked me down the hallway of Gray Court, which at the time was the girls' dorm at University of Richmond. And he introduced me to several of the residents there. And as we approached the last room on the hallway, Will leaned over and kind of whispered in a low voice. He said, "Forget about this next girl. And she's in a serious relationship with this older guy. He's going to ask her to marry him any day now, and that's just it. Forget it." So I took him at his word. And in my mind, I took her off the market, out of the realm of possibility, until I poked my head into her room and saw her for the first time. Before or since, I've never met anybody like her. And from that day, I knew she'd be worth any sacrifice. No price would be too high. So she was not an easy catch. I had to pursue and chase and cajole and cry and beg and gift and promise. And I had to write songs about her and perform them in front of crowds of people. I had to do everything I could to help her see that I was the right pick. There was nothing I wouldn't do. She was the one for me. What have you pursued in your life that hard? Your career or money or prestige, your kids, or maybe that boat or the farm or the guy or the girl? Now translate that. Translate it. The beginning of wisdom is this. Go get it. Go get wisdom. So I want to tell you how I practically pursue, how I practice this chasing of wisdom in my life. I'm going to give you 4 things. So first, and this is the most important thing on the wisdom acquisition list, how to get wisdom, you ask God for it. James makes this super clear. You want wisdom? Don't start with Chuck Trainum. You start with God. You can't get real wisdom without him. He defines it. He invented it. When our church went through the process of choosing the land that would be the future home of our Midlothian campus, we had several options. And we kept praying, and we kept asking God what to do. I mean, that's wisdom, right? Knowing what to do. And so this was a particular situation, but still we were seeking to make the wise choice in that moment. That's what we were trying to do. I'm not trying to be wise so that I can impress people with my wisdom. We want to be wise so that we can know what to do. And so we asked God over months, over and over and over and over again, privately and with groups of people and with our whole church, we prayed about this choice. And the land that God led us to buy was not from a human perspective, it was not the smart choice. I mean, really, the property was had some wetlands on it, and there were some serious questions about how we would access it, and there was drainage stuff and soil quality and on and on and on. There were lots of questions. And there wasn't much around this piece of property either, which raised like the biggest question, which is, where are people going to come from, and how are they even going to know we're here? The argument could be made, and it was made by many thoughtful people, that this piece of property was not a good idea, not for us. Oh yeah, and it was $1 million. I forgot to mention that part. But we kept praying. We kept praying. We kept asking God to help us make the wise choice, which is not always the logical choice. And we felt strongly that God was telling us that this piece of property was it. So we bought it. In April 2016, 6 years ago, we purchased that land. And since then, everything around it has gone crazy. Hundreds of condos and apartments and homes have been built, some shopping centers, meaning that tens of thousands of people are now or will soon be living within just a mile or two of our new building there. We didn't know it when we bought the land, but God did. That's wisdom, knowing what to do. And it was the wise choice. So you got to ask God for it. He has a perspective you don't have. You need God if you want to be wise. So that's the first. It's the most important thing. But the second thing is to hang out where wisdom is displayed. Hang out where wisdom is put on display. Whatever wisdom I have acquired has come in part because I intentionally, deliberately attended events and conferences and seminars where wisdom was put on display. Now, I wasn't looking for quick fixes or slick answers because I know those things just don't exist. I was looking for examples of wisdom in action. This is an important part of the imperative that we get from that proverb I read for you a few minutes ago when it says, go get wisdom. I take that seriously. You got to pursue it. The more that I see it, the more that I can watch it happen, then the more I can recognize it, and the more that I can hopefully begin to act like it, like a wise person. You want to be a more wise person? Well, go to some things where wisdom is put on display. The year before our church began, a pastor who was mentoring me invited me to what was then known as the Leadership Summit. And at that time, it was this 3-day or 2.5-day event, and they wove worship and leadership training and spiritual growth into this experience that was incredibly powerful. On that very first one I attended, I learned and I grew as a leader and as a pastor and as a follower of Jesus and as an aspiring church planter. And then the next year we started PCC, and I signed up for another one of these experiences, and I took people with me this time. And 20 years later, we have been going every year. We've been growing along the way. And hopefully, we've been gleaning a little wisdom. Because that event, which is now called the Global Leadership Summit or the GLS, it's been a major factor in my personal growth for many years now. And I think I know why. Because in the last analysis, when I sort through all of the learning, what I've discovered is that there's something even more fundamental than the practical teachings that I receive. What's underneath of it all is wisdom. And my commitment to be there every year is a core part of my going and getting some of that, like the proverb tells us to do. Well, maybe you already do this somewhere. But if you don't already have an annual routine of a place where you immerse yourself in wisdom for a couple of days, well, consider the GLS, because you'll get wisdom there. And you'll get it on the very first experience if you've never been before. But then if you do what I've done, and if you make it an annual, never to miss part of your year, well, slowly, over time, you'll realize that wisdom is rising up in you, growing steadily, to help you and those around you to know what to do. So I go where wisdom is put on display. Number 3, spend time with wise people. Spend time with wise people. Earlier, I asked you to think of someone who is wise, and you might have thought of people who were famous or that you didn't personally know. But now what I want you to do is I want you to think of someone you know who is wise, who you consider wise. Who around you in your life do you know that you would consider is wise? For many years, one of the wisest people I knew in my life was Sally Mae Pleasance. She was one of the people who helped us start our church, and I spent lots of time with her. And when you spent time with her, you left feeling like you had just been in the presence of greatness. She never thought she was much of anything special, but she really was. She knew what to do, which is why I often sought her counsel. She also knew where wisdom came from, which is why she often prayed with me and often prayed for me. She even had she had this funny way of setting me straight without ever making me feel bad about it. I mean, I would leave and I would think, wait, did I just get reprimanded? How can I be corrected and still feel this good? That's wisdom. Because a wise person, like God granting wisdom, doesn't judge you while they're instructing you. And Sally Mae's gone now. And while I often sometimes I say out loud, I'd love to talk to her about this or about that, I usually follow that thought with, I already know what she would say. Why? Because I spent enough time with her that maybe, just maybe, some of her wisdom rubbed off. Who do you know who's wise? Go spend some time with them. Some of their wisdom will rub off on you too. Finally, and there's probably a lot more we could say about this, but I'll stop at 4, read wise thinkers. Read wise thinkers. Early in our marriage, Susan and I discovered The Firm, that early John Grisham book where the good guy finds himself on the run. The mafia is after him and the FBI is after him and even some of the other good guys are after him. And we took that book one summer and we read it out loud, taking turns reading to each other. We were hooked. We were hooked on the suspense of it all and the action and the excellent writing. And since then, we've read to each other out loud every other John Grisham book that he ever wrote. I am a John Grisham nut, but Grisham is not wisdom, at least not his novels. And that's not an insult. He's trying to entertain. He admits that, and he's good at it. But if you want to grow in wisdom, you have to add some wisdom reading to your James Patterson collection. For me, and this is my list, doesn't have to be yours, I think about people like Henry Nouwen. He's important to me. And Thomas Merton. Stephen Covey. I like Andy Stanley. I think he's really wise. And John Maxwell, too. And I've read many writings and biographies of other people who we see as wise or who I consider wise, people like Billy Graham and Teddy Roosevelt. I just finished a book on Ulysses S. Grant. And I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. That's okay. Throughout the Grant book, as I was reading it, I would say to Susan, hey, whoa, let me just tell you what I just learned. It's so exciting. And she would roll her eyes and start snoring. I get it. It's okay. But find people who are not just experts in their field. Find people you see as wise and read their stuff and read about them. And if you do this regularly as a part of your ongoing pursuit of wisdom, because you're going to go get it, well, you'll find after a long period of time that along the way, you're becoming more wise too. Because God Himself, who you asked for wisdom, is granting it as you pursue it. You can become wise. We can all become wise. So keep an eye on our social media this week. We're going to give you some examples of how to pray for God's wisdom. And don't forget, you can surround yourself with wise people at the Global Leadership Summit this year. You can sign up through our website. Come back next week for more practical teachings from James. Bring a friend, and we'll see you then.